Humans, the only species to complicate a meal with an overabundance of spices, then boast about it. How can they take warfare seriously? The Council of Unified Stars convened in full session. Representatives from 46 species gathered in the vast amphitheater, their murmurs reverberating off the crystalline dome overhead. This was no typical meeting. It was a post-mortem analysis of humanity's latest failed attempt to make its mark on galactic politics. Ambassador Auric of the Valak rose, his gelatinous form quivering with irritation. "Let me summarize," he began, his voice laced with mockery. "The humans launched an attack on the Kret Dominion in under a galactic day. Then they retreated, citing strategic reconsideration." Laughter erupted in the chamber, with tentacles waving and beclacking in shared amusement. Commander Keegan of Earth's delegation leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, remaining silent as the mockery flowed. He wasn't here to defend humanity's honor. That wasn't his style. His purpose was clear reconnaissance. He observed the alien expressions, listening carefully for the things they didn't say. A wiry Euron delegate with 6 eyes sneered. "Perhaps they ran out of those famous snacks of theirs mid-battle," he jeered. More laughter followed, even from the typically stoic Threx ambassador. Keegan exchanged a glance with Colonel Bryce, sitting 2 seats away. Bryce's lip twitched in amusement, but he remained silent. Auric raised a limb, a signal to regain control. "Enough with the speculation," Auric said. "Let's draw a conclusion. Humanity simply lacks the capacity to compete on the galactic stage." Pry Snore, a delegate from an outer system, snorted audibly. Heads turned. "Do you have something to add, Colonel?" Auric asked, his form wobbling more with growing tension. Bryce grinned. "Just enjoying the performance." The chamber grew silent. Aliens loathed ambiguity, and Bryce's words were laced with it. Finally, Keegan spoke. "Auric, let me ask you this. Do you know what we were actually doing during that strategic reconsideration? Running away?" Auric scoffed. "No." Keegan stood, his voice even but cutting. A heavy silence hung in the air. Then Auric chuckled, dismissing the challenge. Keegan tilted his head slightly. "Let's reconvene in 3 hours. I suggest you tune into the Kret Dominion's communications channels." With that, Keegan and Bryce walked out of the chamber. Aboard the Helen, Earth's flagship, in a secure bunker, Keegan and Bryce joined several human officers gathered around a tactical display. The map showed the Kret fleet tightly clustered near an asteroid belt. "Phase 2 is a go," Major Rios said, typing in the coordinates. "They're boxed in. Confirm the payload," Bryce ordered. 5 EMP mines deployed in the belt," Rios replied. "Once they detonate, their fleet will be blind." Keegan nodded in approval. Captain Ellis, standing nearby, grinned. "The Kret soldiers are about to have a very bad day. Let's just say they'll never forget Earth's infantry." Bryce smirked, but Keegan was more focused. "Let them think that," Keegan replied. "It's part of the fun." The room chuckled quietly, but Keegan's tone turned serious. "We've got one shot to shut them down. Everyone ready?" "Yes, sir," came the chorus. Exactly 3 hours later, the Council of Unified Stars reconvened. Auric was in the midst of another mocking comment about humanity's incompetence when the chamber's hollow display flickered on, filling the room with a live feed from the Kret Dominion. The scene was utter chaos. Kret warships floated aimlessly, their systems incapacitated by EMP bursts. On the ground, Kret soldiers scattered in disarray, with human infantry swiftly picking them off. Bryce leaned back, his grin spreading wider. The council chamber erupted, not in laughter, but in stunned silence. For the first time, humanity wasn't the punchline. The silence that followed lingered, thick and unyielding, like a fog hanging in the air. Auric's gelatinous form had stopped wobbling entirely, a clear sign of his disbelief. Other representatives shifted uneasily, their vibrant displays of mockery replaced by murmurs of uncertainty. Keegan leaned forward slightly, his gaze locked on Auric. Auric's mouth slits opened and closed twice before he managed to speak. This footage is doctored. Humans couldn't. It's a live feed," Bryce interjected sharply, his tone dismissive. "Feel free to check the Creedom channels if you doubt it." The Euron delegate sputtered, its 6 eyes blinking erratically. "Even if this ambush succeeds, it doesn't prove humans are capable of long-term strategy." Bryce cut him off with a burst of laughter. "Ambush? That's generous." The Kret lined themselves up and practically begged for it. The chamber rippled with tension. Alien pride, a universal constant, had just taken a direct hit. Keegan stood, addressing the room at large. "You all think humans are unpredictable, impulsive, reckless. You're not wrong, but what you fail to understand is that we use that to our advantage." Before anyone could respond, the chamber lights dimmed and the hollow display shifted. The live feed zoomed in on the Kret flagship, the once formidable vessel now adrift, its engines powered down. Small, agile human ships flitted around it, planting charges on its hull. Bryce leaned in, his voice carrying just enough volume to be heard by all. "You might want to watch this part." A heartbeat later, the charges detonated in perfect synchrony. The Kret flagship crumpled inward, its structure collapsing within seconds. "Messy," Bryce commented, though his grin betrayed no dissatisfaction. Back aboard the Helen, the command center buzzed with activity. The remnants of the Kret fleet were being mopped up, their ground forces surrendering in droves. Captain Ellis appeared on a secondary display, his face streaked with dirt but his eyes gleaming with victory. "Ground secured," Ellis reported. "They tried holding the ridge, but you were right, too rigid in their tactics. A few smoke grenades, some maneuvering, and they panicked." Keegan nodded. "Any significant resistance?" "Not really," Ellis replied, though one of their officers tried surrendering by waving a white flag. "Think they've been watching our old Earth movies?" Bryce laughed. "Classic. Status of our casualties?" Keegan asked. "Minimal. Mostly bumps and bruises." Ellis hesitated, then added with a smirk, "Oh, and one guy twisted his ankle on a Kret food storage crate. Apparently, they eat something that smells like wet socks." "Good to know their cuisine matches their strategy," Bryce quipped. The room shared a collective chuckle, but the levity was short-lived. Keegan's expression turned serious. "This was a warning shot. The Kret underestimated us, and they paid for it. But next time, the stakes will be higher." Bryce folded his arms. "They'd be fools not to," Keegan said. "But I'm not betting on their wisdom. Prepare for the fallout." Back in the council chamber, the mood had shifted. Representatives whispered among themselves, their earlier confidence evaporating. Auric tried to salvage what was left of his dignity. "This demonstration was clearly meant to intimidate the council," he said, his voice struggling to maintain authority. Keegan's response came swiftly. "Intimidation? No. Education." He stepped forward, scanning the room. "You mocked us for retreating earlier. What you didn't understand was that it wasn't retreat, it was preparation. While you were laughing, we were adapting." The Threx ambassador, silent up until that point, finally spoke. "Adapting, a trait often underestimated. Perhaps too often." Keegan gave a small nod of acknowledgement. "Exactly. You think humanity is a joke because we don't play by your rules. But that's precisely why we win. We don't follow your rules, we write our own." The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't discomfort. Bryce leaned back in his seat, crossing his arms. "So, any more jokes? Or is the comedy hour over?" Auric slumped back into his seat, his gelatinous form visibly deflated. The Euron delegate remained silent, its 6 eyes now focused on the floor. For the first time, humanity wasn't just part of the galactic stage. They had the spotlight. The council chamber buzzed with tension. For the first time, humanity had turned the tables. The council's laughter, once freely directed at Earth, had been silenced by the display of human ingenuity and ruthlessness. But silence wasn't victory, not yet. Keegan remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. "The Kret Dominion underestimated us," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge of authority. "And now they're paying the price. If any of you think this change is nothing, then I suggest you keep watching." The Threx ambassador tilted his head. "What is the end goal here, human? Demonstration or domination?" "Neither," Keegan replied smoothly. "It's survival." Earth joined this council under the assumption that mutual cooperation was the goal, but all we've seen so far is condescension, dismissal, and frankly bad jokes. "If you think we're here to play the fool, you're sorely mistaken." Bryce, still seated, added, "We're not looking to start fights, but if one comes to us, we'll end it." The Euron delegate, regaining some of his composure, hissed. "Arrogant words for a species barely out of its cradle." Keegan's lips curled into a faint smile. "Cradles are for resting. We're well past that." Meanwhile, aboard the Helen, the human fleet prepared for the next phase. Major Rios stood over the tactical display, coordinating the final stages of the Kret operation. Captain Ellis appeared on the comms, his helmet tucked under one arm. "Prisoners secured," Ellis reported. "Their officers are surprisingly cooperative." "Guess they weren't expecting this kind of fight." Rios nodded. "Good. Let's keep them talking. The more we learn about their operations, the better." Ellis hesitated, then smirked. Bryce's voice crackled over the line. "Apparently, Kret luxury textiles are a big deal," the officer said. "He'd give us a crate of their finest silks." Bryce chuckled. "Silks? Do they think we're planning a fashion line?" Ellis shrugged. "I told him we'd think about it." The room shared a brief moment of levity before the tone shifted back to seriousness. Rios leaned over the console. "Keep the pressure on. No leniency. They need to understand that Earth doesn't bluff." Back in the council chamber, Keegan and Bryce exchanged a glance. They had planted the seeds of doubt, but now they needed to solidify Earth's place among these species for good. Keegan addressed the council once more. We don't want conflict. Humanity thrives on trade, exploration, and cooperation. But you've spent years writing us off, assuming we'd crumble at the first sign of pressure." He gestured toward the now dormant holo display. "The Kret Dominion made the same mistake. They thought we'd break. Instead, they're the ones retreating." The Threx ambassador stood, his towering form commanding attention. "Your demonstration is effective," he said, "but tell me, Commander Keegan, what happens when the next power tests you? When another species with more resources and cunning decides to challenge Earth?" Keegan met the ambassador's gaze without hesitation. "Then we adapt, just like we always do." On the Kret front lines, the remnants of their fleet limped away under cover of a hastily arranged ceasefire. The Helen monitored their retreat, ensuring no reinforcements would arrive to prolong the skirmish. Major Rios coordinated with Ellis for the final sweep of enemy positions. Ellis's voice crackled over the comms again, tinged with humor. "Got a funny one for you, sir." One of their soldiers asked if our infantry was augmented. Rios frowned. "Augmented? How?" "Enhanced reflexes, boosted strength, stuff like that." Bryce, listening in, snorted. "Tell them it's called caffeine and bad decisions. Works wonders." Ellis laughed. "We do, sir." The human fleet maintained its formation as the Kret remnants slipped further into the distance. The operation was a success, and Earth's forces had made their point. But back aboard the Helen, Keegan wasn't celebrating yet. The council session had devolved into heated debates, with alien representatives arguing over humanity's display. Some saw it as reckless aggression, while others viewed it as an overdue assertion of strength. Keegan and Bryce stood silently, letting the chaos unfold. Finally, the Threx ambassador's booming voice cut through the noise. "Enough. Let us not forget the purpose of this council. To maintain balance and prevent unnecessary conflict." He turned to Keegan. "Commander, your people have proven they can defend themselves. But do not mistake this victory for dominance. You are still newcomers to the galactic stage." Keegan nodded. "We don't need dominance. We need respect." The ambassadors' faces twitched, perhaps in approval. "Respect must be earned. Today, you've taken the first step. But be warned," Bryce interjected with a grin. "And we're great at that." The ambassador clicked his teeth again, but this time it sounded like laughter. "Indeed, we shall see how far that flexibility takes you." As the council session adjourned, Keegan and Bryce walked out side by side. Bryce broke the silence first. "Think they'll take us seriously now?" Keegan smirked. "They'd be stupid not to. But either way, we're ready." Bryce nodded, his grin returning. "Good, because I'm betting it won't be long before someone else tries us." Keegan glanced at him, his tone dry. "Careful what you wish for." Bryce shrugged. "It's not a wish.